Coming up in today's newscast, the voting booths open for the Likud Party's primary elections. The Supreme Court takes aim at tobacco taxes, and Israeli Eurovision hopefuls look to change the EBU'S religious tolerance policy.
The IDF neutralized 2 Palestinian suspects on Monday night who reportedly threw explosives at soldiers by the Jalame security crossing near Jenin. No soldiers or civilians were injured in the incident, but according to the army, soldiers responded with live fire, killing one suspect and seriously wounding the other.
The elder suspect, who was killed by a shot to the head, has been identified as 19-year-old Abed Al-Tawalbe, while the other, an unidentified 15-year-old, was shot in the buttocks. He's since been transferred to the hospital for treatment, but that hasn't been the only such incident in recent days, and the IDF was busy elsewhere in the West Bank as well. At least 25 Palestinian suspects across the West Bank were detained overnight Monday, all for alleged involvement in terrorism and violent acts. Additionally, among the arrests was Suher Barghouti of Kobar near Ramallah, the mother of Salih and Asim Barghouti, who are alleged to have committed multiple terror attacks resulting in several deaths. The army also announced the demolition of the Barghoutis' home, along with plans to demolish an apartment Salih had been using in the near future. The family will have 3 days now to appeal the demolition order on the apartment, but it's unlikely to be accepted as the courts have already rejected the appeal over Suher Barghouti's house. Further, the Barghoutis have a long family history with the Hamas terror group, and Asim had already been imprisoned for 11 years on terror-related charges. He was released in 2017, though, only to later commit these latest attacks with his brother. The two first shot up an Ofra settlement bus stop, injuring 7 and causing the death of an emergency-born infant. Asim later fired at another stop near Givat Asaf, killing 2 soldiers, Sergeant Yosef Cohen and Staff Sergeant Yovel Mor Yosef. He also injured 2 other people. Salih has since been killed while evading capture, though, and Asim was arrested ahead of another planned attack. He was detained with an assault rifle, ammunition, night vision technology, and more.
The Likud Party primaries are today, meaning that 113 polling stations across the country will now be buzzing as 142 candidates scramble to make the top 30 list. And luckily for them, 120,000 Israelis are registered to vote in the Likud primary elections, and each of them get to choose 12 candidates for their potential Knesset list.
Then the final list for each party that will run in the elections in April will have to be submitted to the Knesset by February 21st. Some of the current party list is safe, though, including, of course, Prime Minister Netanyahu and a few candidates of his choice. But that still means that up to a dozen incumbent Likud Knesset members could lose their spots by the end of the month. And despite Netanyahu's immunity in the primaries, he hasn't been off the campaign trail. The Prime Minister has been hard at work convincing his electorate to vote his selections into the top spots. Additionally, Netanyahu's still been campaigning for himself and for the Likud as a whole ahead of the national vote, including by putting up a set of massive billboards in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv, showing himself shaking hands with United States President Donald Trump. The caption on the billboard reads, "Netanyahu in another league," intimating that by being so close with the President of the United States and other world leaders, Netanyahu is the only logical choice as Israel's leader. Many in Israel who look at Trump favorably for his policies on Jerusalem and the Palestinian territories responded well, too.
I think it's excellent. It really gives a message that Netanyahu is really in a bigger league. He can speak with all major leaders from the world, and it's a good thing to tell the people of Israel to vote for him, because he's a leader that can get stuff done with leaders in the world.
Now, ahead of the primaries Tuesday, dozens of senior ministers and Knesset members have just signed a declaration of support of the Nahal movement, which seeks to promote settlement expansion in the West Bank. The Nahal movement, which was sparked during the time of Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir, has just one goal, and that's to see 2 million Israeli settlers living in the West Bank. Additionally, the Nahal movement would see that the two-state solution be expunged from the political discourse, and so while this may not have been the most politically expedient policy to support in the past, today there seems to have been a major shift towards the right among the electorate and many of its candidates. Among many others, Knesset members who signed the declaration include right-wing politicians like Knesset Speaker Yuli Edelstein, Intel Minister Israel Katz, Minister of Immigration Yariv Levin, Regional Cooperation Minister Tzachi Hanegbi, Minister of Jerusalem Affairs Zev Elkin, Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan, Education Minister Naftali Bennett, Culture Minister Miri Regev, and Justice Minister Ayelet Shaked. Even former Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon, who recently merged his new Telem party with Benny Gantz's Israel Resilience Party, signed the declaration Monday night. though the big difference between Ya'alon and the other signatories is that settlement leaders have accused Ya'alon of being a political opportunist. And at any rate, Gantz has already expressed support for the two-state solution, and he'll also have the final say on which party members actually make it into the Knesset without primaries. Gantz reserves the right to approve his party's list for elections all on his own. In other news, liberal journalist Amnon Abramovich of the Yediot Achronot News has just made somewhat shocking statements that seem to support Netanyahu's claims of media bias against him. In fact, in his report published on Tuesday, Abramovich responded to Netanyahu's allegations by referring to unity negotiations between the Likud and former opposition leader Isaac Herzog a number of years ago. Abramovich then wrote that had the unity coalition been formed between them, perhaps the media would be protecting Netanyahu rather than attacking him. Well, Netanyahu then responded on Twitter, writing sarcastically that he could have stopped the witch hunt had he just disengaged to the 1967 lines, divided Jerusalem, and abandoned Israel's security. Things he would never do. And here now with more, senior contributing editor for the Jerusalem Post, Lahav Harkov. Lahav, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so first of all, what are your initial reactions kind of to Abramovich's statements? Could they have been maybe more sarcastic and less literal as kind of the reports are suggesting?
Look, it's not the first time Abramovich has said things like this. In the Gaza disengagement, he said similarly that the press is protecting then Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, who was under investigation on corruption allegations because he was disengaging from Gaza. But Abramovich is a commentator, so the things he says they're not straight news reports. He's not reporting the news. He's giving his interpretation of things. And I think it's pretty clear when you watch the news that that's his job, that he's a commentator.
Sure.
So, this is his perspective.
Well, and the other thing, too, is that, his perspective then is to make these comments which may be taken one way or another, but certainly, as you maybe just mentioned, should be taken with a grain of salt. And then in addition to that, what are maybe some of the more hard objective truths to suggest that the media is actually biased against Netanyahu and not maybe just following up on the news?
Look, there's different media in Israel. The media in Israel is much more varied than it was even, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. And I think it's not fair to make a blanket statement that the media is biased against Netanyahu. There was recently an academic study that came out that talked about from the mid-90s to early 2000s, and then it showed that the media, or at least the sort of mainstream media in Israel, was biased against Netanyahu, but it was before Israeli Yom came out, which is the daily newspaper owned by Sheldon Adelson that's very pro-Netanyahu. There's a right-wing news channel now, Channel 20.
Likud TV, which was just launched.
Right. I mean, Likud TV it's part of their political campaign. It's a webcast. But I mean, and there are more reporters that come from the sort of religious and right-wing world on mainstream channels. And I would say the most prominent and probably one of the most respected political reporters in Israel right now is someone is Amit Segal, someone who is religious and fairly right-wing. I mean, he doesn't come out and say who he's voting for, but you can tell. So I think that the media is in a better place than it used to be. Netanyahu doesn't like the fixation on his investigations, but it's hard to say that it's not an interesting news story to hear every day. Prime Minister Olmert also was investigated, and I think that the media,
he's far from the only
similar.
prime minister to be investigated.
Yeah.
But then again, that kind of brings this debate back towards the discourse in politics versus the media and kind of the balance that they play. Is the media, in your opinion, being as varied as it is it serving its function as a counterbalance maybe to the government?
Look, I don't know that that's really the media's function, to be a counterbalance to the government, but I think that there is one of the important functions of the media is to be skeptical and to not just take things the government says at face value and to investigate and to look into them. And I think that the media in Israel does that. But I think that Netanyahu is complaining. He says that the media is doing that too much. That's when you start hearing these complaints about the media being left-wing or biased against Netanyahu. But I think, look, Netanyahu's been in power for a decade. So for them to ask, why didn't you talk about, Bougie Herzog last week? Well, it's because he's not prime minister. And neither is, Avi Gabai. And now Benny Gantz wants to be prime minister. And so I think people should be looking into him just as much as they are looking into Netanyahu, because this is someone who wants to take his place.
Do you think it's dangerous to be talking, because Netanyahu is not the only leader to be doing this either, to be kind of putting the media down as biased, as corrupt, and all of the other adjectives that have been used?
I think there's a really delicate balance. I think when people say it's dangerous, it's probably overblown. They're probably exaggerating. But on the other hand, and I do think Netanyahu has a right to sort of defend himself when he thinks that something that's being reported is wrong. But on the other hand, I think that he has gone too far, especially in targeting specific journalists, like putting up billboards with the faces of specific journalists who he feels that are biased against him. There was a big billboard on the road between Tel Aviv and Herzliya recently.
Yeah.
And that seems to be, I would say, towing the line of where it's a little bit too much, and it could be sort of inciting against these specific people. And I don't really understand the strategy, let's put it that way, of where let's target these specific people. If the idea is to have a more balanced media, then that's not the way to do it.
All right, Lahav Havkov from JPost, thank you so much again for coming in.
Thank you.
All right, meanwhile, a poll published on Monday seems to indicate that a week since officially launching, Benny Gantz's Israel Resilience Party is still a major threat to the Prime Minister's Likud. In fact, he's polling in second place with 22 seats to the Likud's 30. And for comparison, Yair Lapid's Yesh Atid party is in third place, trailing behind with just 9 Knesset mandates.
However, with the Likud taking 30 seats, it's poised to reform largely the same coalition it had before the current one was dissolved. Though that being said, there's still plenty of time for everything to change, as Gantz has steadily been gaining in popularity. Also, since launching, he's already merged with former Defense Minister Yalon's new Telem party, adding both to his political strength in the polls as well as to his perceived centrist policies. Other mergers, like with the Yesh Atid party, could further this. In response, the new Right Party chief, Naftali Bennett, formerly of the Jewish Home, is reportedly looking to unite right-wing parties and secure a stronger bloc in the parliament, though nothing has yet come of this. And as for the Labour Party, Avi Gabay also made mention of surprises and party mergers ahead of the elections, hinting that his embattled opposition party will still make a comeback after splitting up the Zionist Union. But Gabay has largely been discounted by the public.
Moving on now to politics in the United Kingdom. While Israeli parties look at potentially forming unity blocs here in Israel, the British Labour Party, led by MP Jeremy Corbyn, is now looking to split over issues of anti-Semitism and other disagreements.
More specifically, according to reports in The Observer, a group of MPs from within the British Labour Party has indicated that it will leave to form a breakaway movement on the political centre in light of disagreements over Brexit, immigration, and anti-Semitism. Ahead of any rash political decisions, however, the party unanimously passed an internal motion Monday demanding a detailed report on how the Labour Party has been handling accusations of anti-Semitism. The motion calls on the Labour leadership to adequately tackle cases of anti-Semitism for fear of normalizing and institutionalizing anti-Semitic behavior. And according to reports, the motion includes questions like, quote, what is the true number of cases of anti-Semitism that have been dealt with? What is the backlog of cases at every stage of the disciplinary process, and when will it be cleared? How many staff are working on such cases, and which Jewish organizations have been consulted? End quote. Essentially, the questions are geared at holding party members accountable for dealing with complaints, and General Secretary Jenny Formby, in addition to Corbyn and multiple others, has already been accused of covering up the numbers. It remains to be seen how any of this will be implemented, though, and to what extent. So in the end, Labour may still end up splitting in the near future.
In Argentina, citizens of Buenos Aires who were walking by the iconic Mayo Avenue found themselves in a scenario that looked a lot like a movie scene, as hundreds of police and army units, helicopters, drones, and firefighters, among many others, were displayed for a surprise drill at the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires. And AlTV's Joy Gavijon has the story.
Hi, Aaron. So yes, as you said, it all looked like an action movie scene. On Sunday, the Argentinian security forces held a massive drill that surprised and alarmed the neighbors. But in this exercise, they simulated a hostage situation in the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires, adding the factor of explosives inside the diplomatic mission.
And who organized this drill?
Well, the drill was coordinated and supervised by the National Ministry of Security, the Federal Police, and the First Secretary from the Israeli Embassy near Kochavi. And even though there was no participation from Israeli officials, part of the embassy staff was involved in playing the part of the hostages. And also around 400 special forces from different operational dependencies, including, as you said, firefighters, trained dogs to detect explosives, scientific police, first responders, helicopters, and many more participated in this, what I want to call, incredible display.
Wow, so impressive. All right, so what exactly was the situation like? You know, you told us that they were simulating a hostage-taking scenario, yeah?
Okay, so the head of the Federal Police Commissioner, General Nestor Roncaglia, explained to the newspaper La Nación that the simulated situation was the following. The police got a call saying that 2 terrorists had gotten inside the embassy, placing explosives inside and taking hostages that were forced to get dressed with the same outfit as the attackers, like a movie scene. And also the terrorists were demanding Israel to free some prisoners in order to let go the hostages in exchange.
And okay, now that was the goal for this kind of drill in the Israeli embassy?
Yes, well, in a release from the embassy, they explained that the exercise was meant to practice different scenarios that could actually happen in the diplomatic headquarters, and then be prepared for any situation like this. Now, this is not something completely out of place or hard to imagine, because we have to remember that sadly Argentina, specifically Buenos Aires, has suffered 2 major terrorist attacks. In 1992, a suicide bomb truck exploded inside the Israeli embassy, killing 29 people and injuring more than 240.
And that was only 2 years before the AMIA attack in 1994,
Yes.
the Jewish center in Buenos Aires as well, that left 85 dead and hundreds injured.
Exactly, yes, and Argentina has blamed Iran for both of the attacks, but until today, as we know and we covered, none of the perpetrators have been captured.
And then the local community, of course, as well as the international community, are still waiting for justice to be done on that, I know. So, well, hopefully that day will come. Thanks for your report, Joy. This drill sounds absolutely incredible. I'd love to have been there to see it myself.
Yes, it was. If you look at the video, it was pretty impressive.
All right, well, thank you, Joy, again.
Of course.
The Israeli High Court of Justice has now taken yet another step towards reducing the rate of tobacco consumption in the country, as it ordered Finance Minister Moshe Kachlon to match the tax on loose tobacco with the tax on rolled cigarettes. The tax on pre-rolled tobacco products is, by the way, 3 times higher, however, which will likely double the cost to consumers. The petition to the court was brought against Kachlon and the Health Ministry by the Israel Cancer Association and the Smoke Free Israel organization. And Justice Daphne Barak Erez justified the court's ruling by saying that there was no relevant difference between loose and rolled tobacco products that would justify a gap in the tax rate. Kachlon, on the other hand, responded that while he didn't agree with the ruling, he would respect it, adding, however, that his economic worldview, quote, is to lower taxes, not raise them. So I oppose any tax hike. The citizens of Israel work hard to pay enough taxes, and it is our duty to lower taxes as much as possible, end quote. Kachlon's only option isn't to raise taxes, though. He's only been ordered to match the tax rates across all tobacco products, meaning that he could choose instead to lower the tax rate on rolled cigarettes to match that of loose tobacco. Though that may not be a very popular decision. Israel has already been fighting an uphill battle against tobacco use in the nation, with over a fifth of the population still smoking regularly. This is above the average for Western countries. And to fight this trend, among other initiatives, last year smoking zones in public areas were severely limited. Ride-sharing and transportation company Uber made a major announcement over the weekend that it will be partnering up with the Israeli transit technology brand MoveIt. According to Uber's head of transit, David Reif, over the last several years, Uber has built lasting partnerships with public transportation agencies around the world. And so, quote, as we move towards our vision of becoming a one-stop shop for transportation in your city, our riders need the right option available at their fingertips for every trip, end quote. And as Reich explains, that can even occasionally mean choosing public transportation over Uber services. Well, MoveIt will now provide Uber with real-time transit and route planning services. And so through partnerships with MoveIt and Masabi, an SaaS ticketing and payment platform, quote, riders will be able to see transit information and book tickets in more cities soon. For now, however, the initial launch of this service will be limited to Denver, Colorado. Additionally, apart from location and route planning services, MoveIt brings with it its services in dozens of languages, its 350 million current users, and much more. MoveIt co-founder and CEO Nir Erez then explained further in a statement that, quote, Uber is a visionary company, and MoveIt is proud to partner with Uber, adding that partnering with other global mobility leaders like Uber, while maintaining a separate platform, will aid in MoveIt's mission to, quote, simplify urban mobility all around the world. Finally, this isn't even Uber and MoveIt's first partnership. The two companies teamed up in 2016 when MoveIt users were given the option to order an Uber through its app. But this is one giant leap further. Yet another popular Israeli TV series has just made major headlines, as media company Showtime announced on Thursday the start of production for a remake of Kvodo, a hit legal drama from the Israeli Yes network. And the new limited series will be called Your Honor in English, and it'll be set in New Orleans. Also, star Hollywood actor Bryan Cranston from series such as Breaking Bad has been cast as the lead, and Cranston will also be executive producing.
Apart from the setting and the language, though, not much else has been changed, and Your Honor is largely set to follow the same plot as Kvodo, which first aired in 2017. Now, Your Honor will be 10 episodes long, and the miniseries focuses on a well-respected judge whose son gets into a hit-and-run accident. This forces the judge, played by Cranston, to have to decide between doing what's right or protecting his son. And what results, according to Showtime, is a, quote, high-stakes game of lies, deceit, and impossible choices, end quote. Well, one thing is for sure, and that's that catching Your Honor as soon as it airs is not an impossible choice. Unfortunately for us, though, a debut date for Your Honor has yet to be announced. So at least until then, we'll have to settle for the incredible original Israeli version.
Now, the Eurovision 2019 schedule for visiting world artists is still being put together, but according to Ynet reports on Sunday, international pop icon Madonna is practically confirmed to perform at the competition in May. This after weeks of debate and rumors surrounding her possible appearance. Eurovision spokespersons have yet to publish any formal lineup, but the Material Girl singer is reportedly set to sign a contract for over $1 million, paid for by Canadian-Israeli billionaire and philanthropist Sylvan Adams. And a partner with Adams has also already commented on the reports, saying that the green light has been given by Adams and that Madonna's people and officials from the Cannes broadcaster are all working out the details as we speak. Adams is also best known for having paid for kilometers of bike paths in Israel, as well as for helping to bring the Giro d'Italia bike race to the Jewish state in 2018. Additionally, Madonna would not likely have an issue in performing here in the first place, as she's already visited many times before, most recently in 2012. So the only real obstacle now then seems to be working out the kinks in Cannes' budgetary bylaws. The government-funded entity is only allowed to a limited amount of external funding. And so whether these bylaws interfere with Adams' payments to Madonna or not is now under investigation. On a related note, Israel is today one step closer to choosing its Eurovision 2019 competitor as the qualifying contest Kochav Haba, or Rising Star, moves into its final stages. But there are still some major issues facing some of the top contenders.
First and poised to win Kochav Haba is the Shalva Band, consisting primarily of 8 musicians with disabilities. The band qualified for the finals last Saturday after yet another show-stopping performance. But because some of the group is religiously observant, the Shalva Band has indicated that it will drop out of the competition entirely in order to avoid performing on the Jewish Sabbath. The Sabbath begins sundown on Friday and ends with sundown Saturday. And though the Eurovision finale always falls on a Saturday night, which would be fine, the mandatory rehearsals are held on Friday night, which is not. In light of this, massive online support and even some government backing for Shalva has poured out towards the Eurovision Broadcasting Union, or the EBU, asking to make an exception. An online petition to allow Shalva to perform for Israel without having to do so on the Sabbath has already been signed over 11,000 times, for example, and the Cannes public broadcaster has been in contact with the EBU as well. Culture Minister Miri Regev also has been pressuring the Eurovision organizers by using Eurovision's own language against them. In a letter she sent recently, she wrote that the strict EBU rules deny an equal opportunity from potential contestants based solely on their religious beliefs. The EBU has yet to respond. Finally, as for the remaining performers vying for Kochav Haba's top spot, among others, there's Kitria, who wants to be Israel's first Ethiopian Eurovision contestant, and Shefita, who's been criticized for possible cultural appropriation and a generally hard-to-swallow style.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. The Israeli High Court has just ruled against disproportionate tax rates on tobacco products, all in efforts to curb smoking use in the country. So today's word is hergel, meaning a habit. Unfortunately for public health, though, over 20% of Israelis have the bad hergel, or habit, of smoking. And most pick up the hergel, or habit, during military service, especially young men. But there are many ways to kick a hergel, or habit, to the curb. Among them are changing the environment or other small changes to your daily routine, and another is finding out what triggers your hergel, or habit. When I was a smoker, my trigger was driving in heavy traffic, for example. All that being said, everyone's addictions or hergelim, or habits, are different, so dealing with them may take different approaches. The one thing that definitely seems to carry on, though, is that it's much easier to break a bad hergel or habit with some help, so never be afraid to ask. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight is expected to be partly cloudy and warm with a low of 61 or 16 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow there will likely be cloudy skies and a drop in temperatures to a high of about 73 or 23 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.61 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you for watching.